All right, my friends, welcome once again to the next episode here, Red Delta Project podcast, simplifying fitness, taking a fundamental approach to diet and exercise. I'm Matt Schifferly, and today's episode is all about boosting your energy, getting your energy levels sky high, because at the end of the day, everything becomes so much easier if your energy levels are high. You've got high energy, you're feeling good, mentally, physically, and stuff. Everything becomes so much easier. Your workouts, sticking to a good diet, being able to have the opportunity and being positive to see new avenues of growth, motivation, everything you want comes in droves a lot easier when your energy level is higher. However, if your energy level is low and habitually in the tank, everything becomes so much more difficult. You have to work twice as hard for half of the results in everything. So if there's ever something that we can tackle as a topic that can have the greatest ripple effects to make this whole fitness thing work a heck of a lot better for you, it's boosting up your energy level. Now, unfortunately, there are so many ways we approach diet and exercise conventionally in our fitness culture that serve to drain your energy level on the whole. They bring it down to the point where it's a struggle to do anything productive in the long term. And of course, motivation tanks, and it's harder to get in your workouts and harder to eat well. And it just all is a downward spiral. So today's tips are looking at ways to avoid the negative energy sucks that just drain you of energy, and the things that you can do to boost it up, because it's kind of a either or kind of thing. If you can bring it up, you're also avoiding the things that bring it down, and vice versa. We're going to be looking at physical energy, but also one's personal energy level depends a lot on your mental and emotional state too. If you're mentally like in bad places like depression, anxiety, lots of stress, you can do everything right physically that we're going to be mentioning, and your energy level's still going to be extremely low, because that's one of the biggest influences to your physical energy level is your mental and emotional state. And as always, I'll be addressing your questions here on the podcast, so feel free to ask me anything you like. I'm testing out some new microphone equipments here, so if you guys could give me a thumbs up if the audio is all coming through fine and good. I was testing it out quite a bit earlier, and as far as I know, it was working well, but I want to make sure it's coming through to you guys. So today's looking at first physical energy. What are some of the things that we can do? Well, first and foremost, by far, by far, the biggest influence on your overall physical energy is absolutely, for sure, sleep. Sleep by far is the most. You get better sleep, you're going to have better energy level, full stop. Conventionally, conversely, if your sleep sucks, your energy level is going to suck. And it doesn't matter what your diet's like. It doesn't matter how much caffeine and stimulants you take in. It doesn't matter how much you meditate and stuff. Nothing can replace good sleep. So that's why we've got to be very aware of if your energy levels are being impacted by sleep. And again, there's a lot of messages out there that are counterproductive to this. It's like, oh, how little sleep can you get by on? And oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead kind of thing. And you only live once, so you got to be awake as long as possible. All these sorts of ideas. And all of these are going to just counteract the importance of really good sleep. And I used to be such a guy. I used to kind of rooster, as a friend of mine used to call it. You're roostering, you're all parading around with your chest out like, oh, I got 4 hours of sleep last night because I'm a total badass. And oh, you think that's bad? I haven't gotten a good night's sleep in over 6 months. Look how awesome and wonderful I am, kind of thing. But the fact of the matter is, it's always going to hurt you. It's never going to help. It doesn't make you tougher to get less sleep. It doesn't make you more robust. It doesn't make you like more macho or anything. If anything, it's going to hurt that sort of thing. We talk about particularly testosterone. If you want to kill your testosterone levels, don't get good sleep. If you want to boost them up, probably the best thing you can do is get good sleep. I mean, they talk about what kind of foods do you eat for testosterone levels, and what kind of ways do you modify your sexual behaviors and things like, does masturbation enhance or drain of your energy and your testosterone levels? And there's all this debate. Forget all that. Forget all that. If your sleep sucks, none of that's going to do anything. So in a way, sleep is by far the most important thing. If you do nothing else to boost up your energy levels and give yourself the best fighting chance at getting whatever you're trying to get out of your health and fitness, promise me you're going to make sleep a bigger priority, because that is the lion's share of everything. That is the thing that's going to make the biggest difference. And nothing else we discuss here is going to be able to replace that. And when it comes to general sleep habits, it's the basic stuff. Make sure you have a regular bedtime that you're going to bed. It helps to have a little bit of a nightly routine to help you start to wind down a little bit. Try not to look at screens too much before going to bed. I know that's getting harder and harder these days. I know a lot of times people are like, keep your phone out of the bedroom and stuff. But honestly, like, I'm so low tech in my own life. I've got my laptop, I've got my smartphone. Pretty much if I don't have that with me, I don't have my alarm clock, I don't have the way for clients to text me, I don't have a bunch of things. Just this morning, I was waking up and I had to get up early for a session, and I was kind of dragging, and I was like, oh man, I am really not feeling like getting up this early. It was cold out and everything. And they just texted me saying, sorry, we have to cancel. And I was like, great, awesome. And I just went right back to bed because my phone was right there. So make it a judgment call on your part. Are you better off having the phone there or not? Can you keep away from things like doom scrolling and social media before bed? Because that's always a great way to spend your time before going to sleep, is scrolling through TikTok and Instagram Reels and everything like that. But I'll get into that a little bit later on. But the better the quality sleep is, the better everything's going to be. In fact, I'm almost at the point where if someone came up to me at a party and they were like, I want to get in shape, I want to, build muscle, and I want to lose weight, and the very first thing is like, forget diet and exercise. Don't even look at that yet until you can get your sleep at least marginally good, until you can get that at least somewhat taken care of. Because trying to get into working out and eating better and stuff when your sleep habits are terrible is just building up on a very rocky, sandy foundation. For me personally, whenever I don't get good sleep, I notice my immune system is compromised. My joints are achy. My ability to utilize and digest food gets compromised. My cravings for junk food skyrockets. My appetites go all sorts of out of whack. I'm moody. I'm irritable. If there's just that one thing that can greatly enhance your energy level and everything in your life, sleep is it. So definitely number one priority. Hit, pause. You can stop listening to this podcast right now. If that's the one thing you improve from here on out, you'll be doing yourself a great service and favor. Let me get to some of these questions here. Emma K coming on in saying, hey Matt, while training, how do I know I'm fatigued and ready to leave the gym for the day? Well, I would ask you this, why are you basing when you're leaving the gym on your fatigue level? So this is kind of jumping ahead a little bit in my topic for today. But one of the biggest mistakes we make in our training that just totally runs us into the ground and drains us of our energy is we keep this idea in our head that the point of exercise is to make you fatigued and exhausted or tired, or to kind of beat up the muscle. Now, yes, of course, I've talked a lot of times in the past about how creating a stimulus for hypertrophy and building muscle is heavily correlated with creating a high degree of muscular fatigue. But remember, that's muscular fatigue. There's lots of different types of fatigue that we can experience. And when we have high degrees of muscular fatigue, that's pretty obvious. Like, I'm up on the pull-up bar, I'm like 8, 10 pull-ups, 12, 13, 14, great. And then you're just going to get up there and you're just going to be like, oh gosh, like suddenly it's just, your muscular workload drops like a stone. It's like I was doing 8 to 10 and suddenly it's a struggle to get like 3 kind of thing. And that's what I like to call the fast fatigue. It's not just the slow downward grade of performance in your muscles. You're looking at really creating a heavy level of fatigue. So you just like hit this wall of what your muscles can do. And that should be pretty self-obvious. And if it's not, then I would ask you if you can really ramp up how much into the red zone you're pushing yourself in your workouts. This is something to kind of adjust and manage depending on what your objective is for the workout, of course. But when you really push into the red zone, your ability to create subsequent repetitions and work the muscle hard drops like a rock. So if you get 10 pull-ups and that's really pushing it, then the next one would be like 6 reps or 7 reps, and then 4, and then 3, and it just drops off pretty quick. Now, if you're one of these individuals that are like, I just can't say, I'm 10 reps, 10 reps, 10 reps, 10 reps, 10 reps. Well, I humbly suggest to you, you're really not pushing that hard then. It's going to failure. Not really, because if you can do the same number of repetitions, set after set after set, you're leaving a lot in the tank there. So that's muscular fatigue. All the other types of fatigue, probably not that conducive towards an effective workout. So remember, we are working out to create a stimulus to train and program the body to perform at a higher level. Your workouts are not effective because you beat yourself into the ground. I used to believe that. I used to be like, oh, if I leave the gym and I'm not completely thrashed, then my workout feels like it was not productive, like a waste of time. Couldn't be further from the truth. If anything, leaving the gym feeling relatively fresh is a very good thing. Don't chase fatigue. Chase maybe that muscular fatigue if hypertrophy is something that you're going for. But aside from that, the ability to perform well, the ability to burn calories and fat, the ability to be more mobile and have proficiency in your techniques, fatigue is the enemy of those things. The more fatigued you become, the harder it is to burn fat and calories, the harder it is to perform well, the harder it is to have coordination, the harder it is to keep yourself safe and resilient, and on and on and on and on. So don't chase fatigue, my friends. But when you do notice things are fatiguing, that's when it may be time to switch gears of what you're doing or end the workout right there. Ray Ollinger saying, hey, Matt, what do you think about partial reps? Is there some advantage in these in creating muscle tension? Yes, there is, absolutely. Now, fundamentally, this is kind of the weird thing about, full range of motion and everything. People talk about full range versus half range and half reps and stuff. Think about it, though. Your ability to use that muscle tension is not necessarily dependent upon the full range. Now, of course, yes, when a muscle gets elongated and stretched out under tension, it does create more resistance on the muscle. I always say using a deeper range of motion in many exercises is basically the same thing as adding weight onto the muscle as you're going through that range of motion. That's why people half rep. They have too much weight on their back or whatnot, and they only go down so far because that's all the strength they have. It takes too much strength or too much tension that they can't call into the muscle to go deeper. So generally, I'm a big fan of full range of motion. You get more mobility that way. You have all sorts of other benefits. It's harder on the muscles, yada, yada, yada. But does that mean partial reps are less effective? Absolutely not. Because when you really boil it down, almost no exercise ever uses a particular muscle through a full range of motion. So no matter what you're doing, your muscles are almost always going through a partial range of motion. If it depends on the origin, insertion points of different muscles and stuff, but give me any exercise. And it's like, this is full range. I'm like, yeah, but your triceps aren't quite fully extended there, but your quads aren't fully extended when you're squatting, but your ability to utilize certain muscles in your hamstrings isn't fully getting a full range of motion during like Romanian deadlifts or something. There's always going to be a partial range of motion being had in your muscles, no matter what you do, and no matter how big a range of motion you are in the exercise, because the range of motion in the exercise is not necessarily the full range of motion in the muscle. And it's the bigger range of motion in the muscle that actually matters. Okay, why am I mentioning all this? Because no matter what range you're using in the exercise, you're still just putting tension in the muscle and putting resistance on the muscle. And when you go through a bigger range of motion, it's just adding more resistance, which in my mind is always a good thing. But that doesn't mean that going at a shorter range of motion somehow negates the exercise. I mean, hell, look at isometrics, right? They don't use any range of motion. And they're certainly effective for building it up. So using partial reps can be a very good strategy for several objectives in training. If you're looking to work with a heavier load, for example, powerlifters do this all the time with box squats or having boards and stuff on the chest for bench press, where they're like, we need to get you used to having 315 on the bar. So they'll just shorten your range of motion with 315 if you're not used to benching that much, so you can kind of get used to that feeling of the weight. It could be an injury prevention thing. Some people, they're like, yeah, I can use a partial range of motion, but my knee surgery or something is healing, so I can't go with a full depth lunge or squat. Okay, great. We use partial range for that reason. It could also be that you're just working on a harder technique. Does all the time in combat conditioning, where you use half reps for squats and push-ups and the handstand push-ups and stuff. I do that all the time with my clients. And it's a good way to progress, because when you progress range of motion, you're progressing resistance as well. So it's a great strategy to use, but you don't want to be dogmatic and be like, only use so much range of motion or else the exercise somehow doesn't count. As long as there's tension in the muscle, it counts. That's all that we really need to be going with. Hopefully that makes some sense to you. Super Prime, how's it going? What's your opinion on being fascia dominant and connective tissue dominant? How can we train fascia? Also, while on topic of sleep, do you think using a daylight alarm clock will help wake with more energy? That's a good question. I don't know, because I haven't used it and I haven't seen a whole lot of research on it. Although I certainly would be willing to look into that, because my current sleep situation is such that my room is just black. There's no light, there's no natural light or anything. So it would be an interesting thing to play around with. I would guess it'd probably be a good thing, but it might have its limitations. I can't imagine that waking up with a daylight alarm clock at 3 a.m. would still make you feel like, hey, it's daylight, ta-da, I'm up, I feel great. No, because it's still freaking 3 a.m. So I think it would have some limitations, but probably better than just some blaring alarm clock and stuff. All right. But fascia dominant and connective tissue dominant, to a degree, they're kind of the same thing. And I want to know what you mean by dominant, particular. Dominant at what? Please let me know as far as where you're generating strength and stuff, because you don't really have proactive contractile abilities over those tissues. They're just either tighter or looser, and it's largely respondent based on the contractile abilities of the muscles that they're connected to or surrounding, or are underneath them. So usually with this stuff, again, it boils down to use your muscles better. There's a lot of talk about fascia and connective tissues and stuff, and for the most part, these are tissues in the body you have no control over. You can't condition them, you can't stretch them, you can't loosen them, you can't do anything to them directly, to a very large degree. I know it's some things maybe foam rolling kind of sort of does, and you forget about all that stuff. Forget about connective tissue stuff, forget about fascia stuff, forget about all that stuff. You have proactive control over your muscles. And almost everything we're looking for from condition, I want to condition my heart, I want to condition my blood, I want to condition my connective tissues, I want to condition my skin, I want to condition all this. What do you do with that? You make your muscles do something, and that creates a downward ripple effect of something that hits that sort of thing. Like, we can't condition our heart directly. I can't just make my heart beat faster. I mean, maybe if I have a good meditation practice or visualize something in my head or something, maybe I can make my heart rate speed up or something. But for the most part, I can't control my heart. I have no control over that whatsoever. But if I go for a run, I'm making the muscles in my quads and my glutes and my legs and my arms and stuff, I'm making them contract harder and faster. And that's putting more of a metabolic demand on my body. And as a consequence, my heart has to beat faster in order to get the blood pumping and CO2 and oxygen exchange and all that sort of thing. My heart's beating faster when I go for a run because of what I'm making my muscles do. I'm not making my heart do anything directly. Same thing with like connective tissues, tendons, ligaments, fascia and everything. Oh, it's loosening up. Why is it loosening up? Because my muscles can contract better in a deep squat. I'm focusing on using my muscles better in a deep squat. And as a result, any of the connective tissues that are usually overstrained or tight and stuff, they loosen up because of what my muscles are doing. So anyway, I'm drowning on a little bit about that, but that's probably one of those things that, a lot of times there's a lot of rhetoric around something and do this for this and that. And for the most part, a lot of things in fitness, we don't have that much control over, but we can control our muscles to a large degree. And that's where things come into play. Alex A is asking, hey, Matt, what are your thoughts on the shoulder stand squat from combat conditioning? I think it's a good strategy for particularly learning how to squat properly. I did a very similar type of exercise in my bodyweight training for martial arts, not just for martial artists either, athletes in general, where the first step that I had for the squat chain was standing and picking up a leg as high as you can. Same kind of idea, just more upright than upside down. And typically I don't put people upside down unless they're really comfortable with it. So it's not an exercise that a lot of people use. It's not something that I think is something used by too many people for squat chains and things like that. Generally, I just use upper body stuff. I think there's just better options out there. Anyway, that's kind of my approach there. All right, back on topic for today. We are talking about energy levels. So first and foremost, sleep, by far the most important. By far the most important thing to your physical energy level is your sleep. Second is dietary approaches. Okay, now this is another one where in our fitness culture, we got a lot of stuff out there that hurts your energy versus helps it. And this is why when I wrote my first book, Fitness Independence, and I talked about the 4 fundamental appetites that I'll also be discussing in my next book, a healthy diet adequately satisfies your 4 fundamental appetites. There's hunger, there's nutritional support, there's hedonic support, and the enjoyment we get from food, and there's also metabolic support, your ability to produce and utilize energy. And basically, if your diet does not adequately satisfy those 4 appetites, most of the time, your diet just flat out sucks. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. I don't care if you're like, but I'm organic, but it's vegan, but I'm avoiding seed oils, but it's this many calories, it's optimized according to this form. I don't care. If you're hungry all the time, you got cravings, your blood work is off because you're low in iron or whatever, and your energy levels are typically in the tank because of diet, particularly, you have a crappy diet. It's that simple. You need to make your diet better because the healthiness and ability to utilize food in a healthy way depends on how well you're satisfying those appetites. And if you're not, you have a crappy diet. That doesn't mean you need to change or abandon your current diet. It means you need to fix it. It's inadequate somehow. Maybe one of the common things is you're not eating enough. A lot of the rhetoric in our fitness culture, you've got to eat less. That's because commonly we associate obesity with poor health. Therefore, if you're losing weight and getting as lean as possible, that's always a good thing. But never forget the principle of hormesis, my friends, where if you're getting benefit from more or less of something, eventually you're going to get the opposite result if you keep going in that direction. And this happens all the time with diet. Oh, I started cutting back on calories. I started eating less carbs and sugar and stuff, and I'm starting to feel really good. I'm starting to boost my energy level up. Good, great. Whenever we're doing something new with our diet and exercise habits and our energy levels going up, take that as a sign that you're on the right track, that you're doing something good. But inevitably, a lot of times people come to me, it's like, I was doing great on this whole low carb thing, but man, I'm at the point where I'm avoiding strawberries and bananas. I'm at the point where I'm, avoiding any kind of carbohydrate. And now I go for a hike, here in Colorado, we got our 14ers and stuff. And it's like 20, 30 minutes in, I'm just kind of staggering, I'm bonking so fast. Like, what's going on? It's like, well, your diet sucks. You're not getting enough carbs or you're not eating enough calories and whatnot. So never put the diet rules that you're following in charge of your diet. You should always be in charge of your diet. And if you notice that you're taking things in a certain direction too much, eating too little, too few carbs, too little processed junk foods and stuff, sometimes that can be a beneficial thing. Then if you're going down in energy level, then that's a sign that you're not doing things quite well enough. And I've fallen for this too. I used to all the time have super strict diets, super restrictive and everything. And then I would, quote, slip up, right? And I would go and eat like a cheeseburger or some ice cream or something like that. And then I'd be like, oh my gosh, what did I do? I just messed up my diet. But my energy level for the next day or so would skyrocket. And suddenly I'm not so tired during my workouts. And man, that was the best, bike ride I've had in a while and things. Now that pesky cold, it's finally getting over that cold. It's been there for 3 weeks and stuff. Now, if I was smart, which I usually am not, if I was smart and listen to my body, I would take that as a sign of, okay, maybe I should include the occasional cheeseburger in my diet. Maybe I should loosen up and eat a little bit more during especially busy times when I'm more physically active? No, of course not. I would not do that. And I would just go back to my restrictive ways and everything would crash and burn once again because I was eating right according to the rules of the diet, not according to what my body actually needed. So by all means, change up and play, restrict your diet, add some things in, but take a boost in energy level as a sign you're on the right track. Now, of course, I will amend that with saying that be wary, though, of things that give you a temporary boost of energy, but then later a crash. If you're eating a lot of highly processed foods, you can get a sugar high, but then you crash later. Same thing with like caffeine, energy drinks, things like that. Notice if you're crashing down. And there was a time when I was working at a gym and I had to be up and at 'em at 4 a.m. I had to be at the gym at 4:45. So the only way, and I couldn't just be at the gym and like sit behind the desk and check people in. I was a coach, I was an instructor. So I had to be 5 a.m., bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to go. Hey guys, it's so great to see you. Anyone who knows me knows that is not the way I am at 5 a.m. Hell, that's probably not even me at 9 a.m. half of the time, right? So the only way I could do my job with that, with any decent proficiency, was to slam down a hell of a lot of caffeine. And it was okay for the morning, but man, in that afternoon, my energy level would crash. And I knew exactly why. It's just that was the cost I figured I had associated with it. I just saw it as I was moving my sleep pattern. It's like I'm going to caffeinate myself to the gills, get through these morning sessions, and then crash and have a nap in the afternoon. So the sleep I should be doing in the morning, I have in the afternoon. So just be wary of those sorts of things. Like, wow, eating this food or this energy drink gives me so much energy. That must be a good thing. Not if you're crashing afterwards. But, if it's 3 p.m. and you have a black tea or something like that, and you're like, that really just kind of gave me a little bit of a boost. I'm feeling good and there's not really much of a crash. Well, consider that as a healthy step for you. Let's get to some more questions. Cristobal coming on saying, hey, Matt, good to see you. As well, you, my friend. What is your opinion on multi-rest pause rep types of training? Resting 15, 20 seconds between sets, going close to failure for hypertrophy. So there's lots of strategies out there that are similar to this. And remember that it's not about the strategy or the exercise program that you're using. It's just basically what's happening on the fundamental level. Now, pause rest training, there's other names for it that I'm just blanking on right now. But basically, it's like you do a set, you stop for like 15 seconds, then you jump right back into it. You don't fully let yourself rest. This has a similar effect of like drop sets, pyramid sets, forced reps, going past failure, all these other sorts of things. Basically, what they are strategies. And what was it? Alex? Nope, not Alex. Emma K was asking about pushing, right? Sometimes these strategies can be really good ways to push us to a higher level of fatigue than what we think we're capable of. And that can be a good way to kind of have a belts and braces approach to make sure you're really pushing that muscular fatigue. So let's say you're doing pull-ups and you're like, okay, 10, that's enough. You drop down and you don't get a drink, don't stretch out, just kind of take a couple deep breaths and then bang, you're right back up at it and get a couple more reps. And you just do that 2 or 3 more times. And that just serves to build a little bit more ability to really turn the screws to the muscle and really push it to a high state of fatigue. Now, again, like I said, it seems like stimulating hypertrophy through fatigue, it's kind of like pulling the trigger of a gun. You need a certain amount of pressure on that trigger and then it fires. But beyond that point, squeezing harder doesn't do you any good. It may very well be the same thing with fatigue and creating muscular fatigue. You need a certain amount to trigger, if you pardon the pun, that stimulus for hypertrophy. But then beyond that, more fatigue doesn't potentially help you. And so a lot of the research that I've seen, particularly on Stronger by Science and stuff, seems to suggest that as long as you're pushing hard enough in your straight sets, the pause rest training, the drop sets, and all these high fatigue sets, they may not really do that much for you. But then the question is, well, how do you know if it's enough? Well, honestly, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. So I would, play with it a little bit, see what happens. See what happens if you have some pause rest training or drop sets or what have you, and see if you can bring a bit more stimulus. If nothing else, It's good for mentally knowing what it's like to push to that level. Because 9 times out of 10, quote, failure, reaching failure, is more of a mental thing. We're stopping when we think we're at our limit, when a lot of times we're not. It happens all the time where people are like, this is my limit. I'm sure it's my limit. And then something shifts in their perspective. They've got a coach yelling in their ear. They've got an audience watching. Their gym crush walks in. Something happens that just changes their emotional orientation or the mental focus on their training, and they go way past whatever they thought was their limit. Happens all the time. That's why I always tell people that don't think that your limits of pushing to failure is so objective. A lot of times it's much more subjective, and strategies like the pause, rest, and training can be good ways of exploring those upper levels for you. And if nothing else, if it's mental condition, then it's going to be the thing that really can boost you up to a higher level. Ben is saying, hey, Matt, what do you think about a loaded pistol squat with resistance bands? Does it allow proper progressive overload if you increase the size of the band? It could. I haven't played with it all that much, partially because, and I do like the idea of stretching the band out as you're standing up, strength curve, all that kind of thing. But the thing with a band you have to be aware of, as well as cables, is that they always create resistance against a fixed point. So whether you're standing on the band or the band is under like a step or using a cable machine or something, that fixed point where the resistance is could potentially pull you backwards or forwards or left or right or something. It's just something to be aware of. It's not a bad thing. It's just be aware of it, because your stability in single leg training can be easily compromised. But when you're using like a free weight, like you're holding a kettlebell or something, that's usually resistance against gravity. It's not from a fixed point. So it's usually a little bit more practical and easier to manage than using bands or cables that come from a fixed point. So it's just something to be aware of. But hey, anything that gets you some more resistance if you're pretty strong at that movement, so you can create more tension in the muscles, going to be a step forward. Mariano, how's it going? And that, although I don't like painkillers, if I feel muscle pain or headache before going to sleep, I no longer hesitate and take something, because I know that otherwise I have a bad rest. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm never against any sort of like sleep aids, painkillers, things like that. What I usually am wary about is not the thing itself, but a dependence on it. Earlier this year, I was dealing with quite the anxiety levels and things, and it was really compromising my sleep. So my friend gave me some melatonin, and I had some CBD drops for dealing with anxiousness before bed and things. And it was good, but I was always kind of in the back of my mind, like, this is good, but I don't want to have to depend on these things. So I would start to back off as quickly as I could, decreasing the dosage, decreasing the frequency and stuff. Use what you need, but dependence can be a very rough thing to deal with. And then you've got a whole nother set of problems. Joseph Bell is saying, Matt, agree. Everyone needs sleep. I'm home recovering from surgery. Ouch. Hopefully your recovery is fast, my friend. And I had this week, so I'm getting plenty of rest. Good. So that brings me to my next point with energy, is that few things will compromise your energy level like pain. And again, in our fitness culture, and even just modern culture or Western culture here, at least in America, the orientation of pain is very dysfunctional sometimes, where we seem to accept pain as just an inevitable part of life. It's like, oh yeah, I've got this pain in my knee, and then I see him 6 months later. How's your knee pain? Oh, it's still there. And I'm like, why? You should be taking care of that. Like, pain is Mother Nature's way of saying something's wrong and needs to be fixed. There's that old adage, pain is weakness leaving the body. No, getting rid of pain is weakness leaving the body. The pain is creating the weakness and highlighting the weakness or the misalignment or the imbalance and stuff. Pain is not good for you. It's the same thing as that lack of sleep. I used to be the fool thinking that makes me tough to be in pain, makes me macho, makes me resilient to endure pain. No, it doesn't. It makes you weaker. And it makes me stupid, because I was like, yeah, I know my knees are shot to hell, but I'm still going to go and do these, jump sprints and everything, even though they kill my knees. It's like, you ever listen to your body? Back then, no, because I was an idiot. But pain is always going to hold you back. There was a time I was doing a bike race down in Ringwood near uh, West Point, and it was one of the biggest changes in energy level I'd ever experienced from physical pain, because I was in like second place in the race and I was doing great. And it was just one of these hardcore races. I felt amazing, wonderful, good. And I was like a quarter mile from the finish line and bang, and I crashed really, really hard. And I got all cut up here on my forearm, just below the elbow. And apparently there's a lot of nerves here that can really influence just your systematic feelings. Like you ever bump your funny bone, that's what's going on, is you're hitting a collection of those nerves and you just feel a combination of pain and soreness and nausea, and all this stuff is happening because of these nerves. Well, I got that really cut up and really beat up during that crash. And I literally went from just destroying that course to barely having the strength to pedal my bike along flat ground. Barely could move at all. And it was like all the energy just got sucked out of me. Now, physically, yeah, I was beat up and stuff, but it was the energy level that I noticed I had just lost so much of it. And my good friend passed me and he's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, I'm good, just keep going and stuff. And I still managed to hold on to third place because it was near the end of it. But holy smokes, I couldn't believe how fast I went from feeling good to feeling absolute lethargy, could barely stand up because of the pain going through my body. So don't accept pain, my friends. If something hurts you while doing it, take a lesson from it and try to investigate, why am I in pain? Because anytime you can get rid of pain and discomfort, you are going to increase your available energy for productivity. And that's a lot of things. Again, mountain biking, I used to ride without gloves. I used to ride barefoot. I was like, I like the feeling of the grips. I like to have more contact with the bike. It's very, kind of tactile feelings and stuff. And all my friends are like, "You're an idiot. You're riding mountain bikes. You got mud all over you." The mud is basically liquid sandpaper, for those who don't know, especially on the East Coast. They're like, "Why are you not wearing gloves? That's stupid." And then finally one day I had this race and it was sweaty and wet and everything. And all the skin on the bottom of my hand got all torn off and everything. And I could barely hold on. I was like, yeah, I need gloves. And then I for the rest of the season, I ran probably a few percentage points faster on every race. Why? Because I was more comfortable and less in pain because I was wearing gloves. And again, a stupid, stubborn me is like, "Oh, I'm tough, I'm macho. I don't need, I like blisters on my hands." No, pain will always hold you back, my friend. So if you have pain, get it diagnosed in person, get an idea of what it's going to take to fix it and get it over with as fast as possible, because that's going to make a big, big difference in your energy level overall, is getting rid of pain. Frederico coming in saying, "Hey, Matt, how can we overcome fatigue when we're in a caloric deficit?" So it kind of depends on several things. One is how steep the deficit is. So the more steep the deficit is, the more fatigue you're going to have. Two is, are you creating the deficit through a specific restriction of certain foods? Again, a lot of people these days are creating more of a caloric deficit by heavy carb restriction. And sometimes that fatigue is due to more of the heavy restriction of the carbs rather than the actual calories. So maybe just kind of play with the macronutrients in there and add just, a English muffin at breakfast time, or some white rice, or something that's relatively low calorie, some fruit or something, but get some sugar into your system. That can make a big difference. The classic way to amend that sort of thing too, simple caffeine. Black tea, of course, doesn't do you any good if you're going to Starbucks and you're getting a Macpo, Frappo, Laco, caramel latte, chino with extra whipped cream. I mean, that's not coffee. That's just, cake in a cup. That's dessert with a little bit of coffee thrown in, or these days espresso. But if you can get some low to no calorie sources of caffeine in your diet, that can help augment things a little bit. I know these days in the news, there's a lot out there about these new weight loss drugs coming on the market and everything. And every time this happens, every time we've got these new weight loss drugs, I just kind of shake my head and I'm like, guys, we have had the world's most perfect weight loss drug for centuries. It's relatively safe. It's cheap as dirt. You can consume it all the time. It's enjoyable to consume. It's just caffeine. Because at the end of the day, all weight loss drugs do is just serve you to try to kill your hunger or boost your energy level, and caffeine does both. So that's why I'm always trying to champion. Like, we've already got the perfect weight loss drug out there. It's caffeine. And then people are like, but I already drink coffee. It doesn't seem to do much. It's like, exactly. Weight loss drugs aren't going to do that much for you in general. All right. Just Florian coming on saying, no question here. Just want to say your books inspired me to try calisthenics years ago, and I've made more progress ever thought was possible. Thank you for what you do. Thank you so much, Florian. It is a pleasure to help in any way that I can, my friends. While you're talking about that, I just started looking into ways to get my books on PDF. I know I already have it on PDF in the merch store, but some of you don't like going through that. It's kind of a weird thing. So I am looking at ways on bringing all of my books on PDF through the reddeltaproject.com itself. And it's going to be a much better way to buy and consume my books and stuff. And you just reminded me of that. So keep an eye on the Instagram, keep an eye on reddeltaproject.com for fun changes coming in the next week or so, as it's going to make it a lot easier to consume some of my content. Homework is coming in saying, hey, Matt, what do you think of daily supplements? I use Cialis, 0.5 milligrams or so daily for nitric boosting, for steroids, synthesized glycine for sleep, thinking menthol blue. So I don't really know much about, and keep in mind too, there's a difference between a supplement and a drug. Okay, now a supplement is something that gives you that you're already going to be able to get from food anyway, like protein, right? If I'm getting protein from a supplement, but I could also get it from food, that's a supplement. Now a drug is something that you're consuming or you're getting that you wouldn't ever get really anyways. You know, things like a testosterone boost and things like that. If you're like, I'm taking this thing and there's no way I would be getting this unless I was taking this pill, that's a flat out drug. And that doesn't mean it's a good or a bad thing. Case in point, like caffeine, right? Caffeine is a drug. It is not a supplement. It's not a nutrient that we need in order to survive. It is a flat out drug, which I'm not against, but we've got to be wary of it. We've got to be wary of forming dependencies. We've got to be wary of toxic levels and things like that. These are things to ask your dietitian and your doctor for, especially if you're consuming drugs and stuff like that. But as always, kind of listen to what your experiences are. What's going on when you have these? And are there any side effects or backlashes too? You know, we go in one direction, like, oh, this brings everything up, my energy levels up. But like consuming the caffeine, are you crashing afterwards? Is there a detrimental thing? And then you've got to weigh the pros and cons back and forth. Let's see. One more thing from Remy saying, what are your thoughts on active recovery? About to go for a walk, sunny day, and do stretching when I get home. Heavy workouts last 2 days with legs and shoulders. Yeah, always remember that fundamentally your body doesn't know what exercise is. It doesn't know what workouts are. That's just a concept we dreamed up out of thin air, like unicorns and things like that. We invented workouts and exercise. So the whole idea of active recovery is another completely fictional concept where we're like, oh, it's active, but it's also recovery. No, your body's always recovering. You're always in recovery mode. You're always in stimulus mode. It's just a question of what's the balance between the two? Because fundamentally, everything in fitness works through the fundamental processes of having an input and having an output. And when we are low on energy or we're losing energy chronically, it means you have too much output and not enough input. You're talking about diet impacting energy level, where if you have way too much output of calories and not enough input of calories, yeah, that's going to compromise your energy level. And that may be necessary in the short term. You know, same thing with nutrients, same thing with sleep. If you're up too late and you're not getting enough sleep, you've got too much output of your energy and not enough input of, basically you could think of like consuming sleep, right? The regenerative process. So when we are doing active recovery, we have some degree of activity, which is output, and we're trying to have our recovery and stuff, which is input. But sometimes we can kind of speed things up just a bit with a bit of activity. Now, I, for one, am not a fan of like total rest days. I'm always like, get activity every single day. You're meant to be active every day. Do something that's good for you. It's good to keep the joints loose. Blood. A lot of times active recovery is seen in the light of stiff and aching muscles. So if you do a heavy leg day, for example, and you wake up and you're like, God, my legs are stiff and they're sore and they're tight, that's inflammation. That's no different than if someone just took a fist and hit you in the leg and it swelled up. Same thing, inflammation from damage. So when we get our blood flowing a little bit, we help to break up and move out that inflammation, which can certainly help. It's a good thing. But that's why a lot of people do, quote, active recovery, is they're just trying to break up and move out some of that inflammation. And Remy's following up, I always feel better, mentally better for the walk, small hike after a few hard days too. Absolutely, absolutely. So this is a good place to transition, actually, about our mental state on our energy level, because this is a big one, especially these days. I think the pandemic really threw people for a loop, where it's like, oh, the stress and anxiety and things mentally was affecting them physically as far as their energy levels go. And again, I always tell this story about, I was walking into a gym. This is the first gym I ever belonged to. It was a hardcore bodybuilding gym. Awesome, loved it. And literally as I'm walking from my car in the parking lot, I got a call from my then girlfriend, soon to be ex, basically breaking up with me there in the parking lot. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. I didn't even see it coming. It was out of left field and everything. And I was just totally like, oh, this is terrible. So I went into the gym thinking, all right, I'm going to use this as like fuel for my workout. I'm going to destroy the weights. I'm so pissed and stuff. It totally didn't work that way. I swear 20-pound dumbbells felt like it might as well have been 100 pounds. It was 10 minutes of me trying to do anything and I couldn't do anything. And I just went home and had to deal with that whole situation, because mentally and emotionally, it just drove me into the ground because of the stress and anxiety. And unfortunately, now it's even harder for us to get away from stress and anxiety inducing stimuli, because we've got social media, we got smartphones, we've got news 24/7, we've got demands at work, we've got thoughts going through our heads and everything like that. So what can we do about that? Well, it's partially about, can you have some influence over controlling it? I was just talking with a friend of mine the other day about how social media now, she's like, oh, social media, it's so toxic and ridiculous and negative and stress inducing, anxious. And I was like, so change it. We can, to a very large degree, influence and control what is in our social media feeds. Now, I don't spend too much time on social media, but I know that if I spend more time looking at certain content, it's going to give me more of that content, good or bad. YouTube now has, and I think other platforms have this too, where you can click on a post or the settings on a post and literally tell the algorithm, don't show me this. There was one time I clicked on this weird video. I forget exactly what it was, but it started to go in this really negative, misogynistic slant for some reason. And I was like, no, I don't, no. I closed out. But then all this like misogynistic stuff started showing up on my YouTube recommended page. And boy, you can believe I didn't click on that stuff. I went to every one. I was like, don't show me this crap. Like, I don't want this, I don't want this garbage and stuff. And within like a day or two, YouTube was like, okay, we won't show you that stuff anymore. I can curate my social media to be positive, to make me feel good. I don't get any of that stress and anxiousness and stuff when I go on my social media most of the time, because I've curated it proactively. It's the same thing with having, good food versus crappy food in your home. You're the one putting the stuff into your fridge, into the cart. If you lament to me about how it's impossible to find good food to eat, especially at home, it's like, well, why are you putting bad food and crappy foods in your house? If all you got is top ramen, cheese whiz, and hot dogs, and you're like, oh, it's impossible to eat a good salad. I'm like, well, then start buying salads. You're the one who brings the stuff into your house, quote unquote. In your house, the mental house, you can be more aware of that stuff. I mean, I don't watch the news for crap. The only news I get, I've got 3 sites that I have bookmarked. I've got macrumors.com, because I know what is coming up potentially with new fun Apple products. Top Gear, which keeps me in the loop of new automotive developments, and Brickset, which has reviews on cool like Lego sets coming out. That's where I get my news. All right, that's my news feed and stuff. Social media is all on stuff that's usually like comedy and things. I think half my YouTube is like, hey, check out this comedian in your area and stuff. That's my news feed. If it's really important, I figure I'd get to it. But man, I don't own a TV. I don't have cable. I don't have all this sort of thing. I never watch the news. I don't have, I don't never go to news websites and everything like that. No, if it's important, I'll learn about it. I'll know about it. Yeah, I know crap is going down in Palestine and the Israelis and everybody are fighting each other because I heard about it, from just friends and stuff. They're like, man, it's going pretty rough out there. I'm like, yeah, I know, it always is. Like, this isn't new kind of thing. It sucks. But when it comes to the ability to curate the information coming to us, yes, we have more information coming at us than ever before, but we also have far more power and control over what kind of information is coming to us. And that gives us a lot. We just don't know how to do it yet. We're just, half the time, we're not even aware of it yet. Social media, news sites, and everything like that, you can control this stuff better than ever before. Before, if you wanted news of any kind, you had to sit down to the TV at a certain time, and they're like, here's the news, and this is all you've got available. Like, you don't get a choice in what you're going to hear or see or feel. But now you do. So in a way, I know a lot of people lament about, oh, it's so negative out there. There's so much toxicity and stuff. It's like, then get rid of it. Then tell the algorithms you don't want it. Tell the algorithms you want stories about charity work being done or cute puppies on your YouTube feed and everything like that. You can tell the feeds what you want to a large degree, and that makes a huge difference in your stress levels. All right, let's get to some more. Crystal balls coming on. Oh, this is going. Excuse me. Saying progressive calisthenics versus weighted calisthenics, which is better for you and why? It all depends on what you're doing, my friend. But remember, fundamentally, they both do exactly the same thing. So does it really matter? Not unless it matters to you. Okay. So as I explained in my latest book, Progressive and Weighted Calisthenics, I address both of them at the same time, right? And the reason why I was going to put this into two books, I was going to have a book on progressive calisthenics and then a book on weighted calisthenics. But honestly, there wasn't enough about weighted calisthenics to fill an entire book, in my opinion. So I just made a chapter or two about it. Because fundamentally, again, it's all just weightlifting. Calisthenics is weightlifting. And when it comes to progressive calisthenics, your weight stays the same, your body stays the same. And in order to add resistance, you change where the weight is on your body. So if I'm doing push-ups on like a countertop, I've got a lot more weight on my feet than on my hands. And if I get down on the floor for push-ups, I've literally added weight to my hands from my feet. Okay, that's how progressive calisthenics works, is you're still weightlifting and you still add weight to increase resistance. You're just changing it from one part of your body to another. That's primarily how progressive calisthenics works. Your weight stays the same, your technique changes. Weighted calisthenics is your technique stays the same and your weight changes. So that's also up and down. So if I put on, my Kensui weight vest and I've got 40 pounds on it, that's adding weight to me. I'm now heavier even though I'm doing the same technique. So the weight distribution of my body, the same. If I do banded pull-ups or dips, that's taking weight off my body. So it goes the other direction, adding weight or subtracting it. But that's basically the difference. But fundamentally, it's still weightlifting. You're still adjusting resistance through adjusting weight. It's just how you're kind of doing that. There's pros and cons to both. It's not like one is always inherently better. With progressive calisthenics, you have the advantage of efficiency and simplicity. You still just need a sturdy pull-up bar, and that's about it, right? You don't need a whole lot of equipment, very free autonomy and independence. But it does require more technical proficiency, particularly if you're shifting weight from left to right sides of the body. That requires more stability and control and tension control and all these other sorts of things. That's a plus, but also it can be holding you back if that's not very good. Weighted calisthenics, you don't need that much improvement in technical proficiency. So you can just slap on a weight vest and suddenly push-ups are harder. Great. But you're possibly missing out on some of those opportunities to improve things. Plus now you have a little bit more of dependence on more equipment, weight vests, dip belts, weights, dumbbells, kettlebells, that sort of thing. So it's pros and cons of each. That's why grind style calisthenics uses both. And that way you have the benefits of both and they cancel out each other's downsides. Alex A is saying, hey Matt, You ever tried magic mushrooms that are legal in Denver? Yes, they are. I tried it recently and I feel like a positive paradigm shift occurred. Yeah, there's a lot of therapeutic benefits to it. And since we're talking about mental health, like I know several people who have used psilocybin, particularly like microdosing and stuff, to just level the hell up in dealing with anxiety and stress. I was working with one guy last year, and it was like overnight. And after a couple of weeks working with him, I'm like, dude, I don't know what you're doing, but your numbers on everything are doing great. Your energy level's great. Like, what are you doing? And keep it up. He's like, yeah, I've been microdosing with like psilocybin and stuff. I'm like, great, well, keep at it. Whenever you're using something and it's creating that much of a positive benefit, see if you can keep it going, and then try to keep that going without it, maybe to not foster too much of a dependence. So I think it's good for experimentation. I think it is a little too young in the science and the research to be like, great, it's awesome, it's wonderful, there's no downsides, let's always do it. Like, pump the brakes there, buddy. It is a drug, and all drugs do carry side effects and potential downsides, and we need to know where those are, how to use it smartly. That's why I'm not about potentially illegal, making steroids illegal and stuff. We're losing so much research and data because people are like, oh, it's bad for you, it's horrible, don't ever do it. I'm like, yeah, but there can be upsides, there can be advantages, there can be potential positive uses for these things. Same thing with marijuana, same thing with acid and or LSD and things like that. Like, if we know how to use it well, it can be good. And if we know how to use it well, we also know how to use it bad, and we can avoid that. But when we don't have the research and the freedom to explore and research this stuff, then we just say, okay, it's always bad, so then we're listing out on the benefits, or it's always good, and then we're at high risk of whatever downsides there could be. So we need more research into these things. We need to understand them to a higher level. And the more we do that, the more we can use it in smart and healing situations. I mean, I was at a party a few weeks ago, and there was this gal, and she was just kind of like off her rocker. And I was like, well, what's her? It's like, oh, she's been really hitting the ketamine. And I'm like, wet behind the ears, like, ketamine? What is ketamine? Oh, it's a drug. And they're like, okay, great, whatever. No thanks kind of thing. And then I was at my therapist that I've been seeing since April, and she was talking, I noticed a poster, and she was advertising ketamine therapy. And I was like, wait a minute, you're giving patients ketamine? She's like, yeah, if we do the right dose with the right cognitive behavioral therapy, it can be very transformative. And I was like, whoa, hold on. This is the same drug at that party this gal was completely messed up on, and she couldn't even walk straight or talk to me. And yet you're using the exact same drug to get people off of PSD and traumatic experience. They're like, what is, and it was just, again, it's like, okay, yeah, it's how it's being administered, how it's being used and stuff. So if you want to explore that stuff, make sure you're being smart about it. Don't just take it willy-nilly, get the stuff off the internet and just be like, great, I'm going to just try it. Do your research on it. And if possible, get some professional guided help with it. Someone who knows what they're doing, who can steer you on the right path. Christopher is saying, are you currently doing wide grip pull-ups or push-ups? I know you prefer a center line principle, but have you ever changed the width? Shoulder width is pretty much as far as I'm going with width. I never go wider, partially because progression, I'm almost always using a progressive technique, which almost always requires the hand to be close to the center line. And that's about 80% of the time anyway. And if I'm warming up with something light, it's about shoulder width or slightly narrower. I'm never doing anything wider than that. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's harder on my joints. I don't think it has much benefit. If I really want like the quote wide effect, I'm doing rear flies or chest flies on my suspension straps. So I'm doing an exercise that goes to the extreme of width, where I'm going really wide with flies and chest flies. So any of if you go wider, it's, doing this benefit or that benefit or hitting the muscles this way, I guarantee I'm getting a hell of a lot more of those benefits with just some chest and rear flies. So I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything with that as well. So to wrap it up, my friends, let your energy levels be your guide. Having a high energy level is a very powerful resource in life, but especially with fitness. Be mindful of things that are dragging you down mentally, emotionally, physically, right? It's natural for your energy levels to change and fluctuate, of course. I'm not saying you're going to be like Zippy the atomic hummingbird all the time, of course. You're going to have periods where your energy levels lower and stuff. But on the whole, we want that thing to be as high as it can be and to be at a good altitude. Get your rest, get your food, feed yourself well, take care of keeping toxic messages and ideas out of your house, literally and figuratively. Bring positivity in. Be mindful of people who have just a negative, toxic attitude around you. Limit your exposure to such individuals, because the more you can bring good, positive, energy producing things into your life, the better off you're going to be in every way, shape, and form. If anything, it's one of those live longer and prosper kind of things. So there you go. I hope those things help you. And again, if you just take one of those tips to heart over this past week, it will make a big difference. And as always, the link down below will reference all the books and things that I was talking about for references, and grind style calisthenics, building muscle and strength with bodyweight training. RedDeltaProject.com has got all that stuff as well as a good way to contact me, reddeltaproject@gmail.com. And the audio for this is always being reproduced on the podcast directory of your choice within the next several 24 hours or so after this. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming on. I do sincerely appreciate it. I will talk to you hopefully next week. I don't think I have anything going on next week. So next week as well, send any of your requests for topics and ideas for the podcast at Red Delta Project's Instagram, and maybe I can post those as well. Bid you adieu, my friends. Till then, be fit and live free.